श्रीवसत प्रताप परिषद तारा गण जीनिया परिषद तारा गण जीनिया परिषद तारा गण जीनिया परिषद तारा गण जीनिया नाचे नाचे निताई गौरव जमैया नाचे नाचे निताई गौरव जमैया बाजे फूल करताल मधुर संगीत भाव गगन भरी लोहरी भरिया बाजे फूल करताल गगन संगीत भाव गगन भरी लोहरी भरिया बाजे फूल करताल मधुर संगीत भाव गगन भरी लोहरी भरिया चंदन चर्चित गाए फागु बिंदु बिंदु गाए वनमाला डोले भालो बोलिया चंदन चर्चित गाए फागु बिंदु बिंदु गाए वनमाला डोले भालो बोलिया चंदन चर्चित गाए फागु बिंदु बिंदु गाए वनमाला डोले भालो बोलिया नाचे नाचे निताई गौरव जमैया नाचे नाचे निताई गौरव जमैया चरण लोपुर रणरायनिया चरण लोपुर रणरायनिया चरण लोपुर रणरायनिया दुई भाई नाची गाए सहचर गण गाए 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 गदाधर अंगे कोरे धुइया गदाधर अंगे कोरे गदाधर अंगे कोरे धुइया गदाधर नाचे नाचे निताई गौरव जमैया नाचे नाचे निताई गौरव भसानीला एबे प्रभु प्रकाशिला पूरबरा भसानीला एबे प्रभु प्रकाशिला पूरबरा भसानीला एबे प्रभु प्रकाशिला पूरबरा भसानीला एबे प्रभु श्री वृंदावन नैया से वृंदावन ए नदिया बिहारे गंगा तीरे से धीर समीर बिहारे गंगा तीरे से बिहारे गंगा तीरे से धीर समीर वृंदावन दास को है जानिया वृंदावन दास को है जानिया नाचे रे निताई गौर गुना बनिया 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 निताई गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि जय वृंदावन दास ठाकुर प्रभुपादा वृंदावन दास ठाकुर प्रभुपादा जय वृंदावन दास ठाकुर प्रभुपादा वृंदावन दास ठाकुर प्रभुपादा जय राधा कृष्ण चंद्र राधा कृष्ण चंद्र जय राधा कृष्ण चंद्र राधा कृष्ण चंद्र राधे जय कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम जय निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग जय निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग जय निताय गौरांग जय श्रीनिवास गोविंद श्रीनिवास गोविंद श्रीनिवास गोविंद जय श्रीनिवास गोविंद जय श्रीनिवास गोविंद श्रीनिवास गोविंद जय श्रीनिवास गोविंद जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह प्रहलाद नरसिंह प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय भक्त हनुमान जय गरुड़ भक्त हनुमान जय गरुड़ जय भक्त हनुमान गरुड़ दे भक्त हनुमान जय गरुड़ दे जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय राधा Today is the disappearance day of Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, and Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur is singing this beautiful Vaishnava song. We'll meditate upon the translation. Nitai and Gaura Gunamani are dancing and dancing with beloved Gadadhara on their left and Srivasa and Advaita on the right, while their associates defeat the stars that surround the Gaura moon. The mridangas and kartals are played and sweet songs are sung. The sky is filled with the chanting of Harinam. His body is anointed with sandal paste and drops of holy juice, and a forest flower garland dangles nicely across his chest. A white Brahmin thread hangs across his neck. His form defeats millions of cupids, and ankle bells jingle on his feet. The two brothers are dancing and their associates sing while Gadadhar's body is pelted with powder. Now the Lord remanifests his previous joyful Vrindavan pastimes in this Nadia. Now he enjoys on the bank of the Ganga just like in Vrindavan's Dhira Samira Kunja. Vrindavan Das tells you, for he knows it. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur ki, Nitai Gaurang ki, Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada ki. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare. Hare Krishna. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Hare Krishna. Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana 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 Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya 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 Radha Vrindavan Chandra Radha Vrindavan Chandra Radhe Jaya Radha Vrindavan Chandra Radha Vrindavan Chandra Radhe Jaya Nitai Gaurango Nitai Gaurango Nitai Gaurango Jaya Nitai Gaurango Jaya Nitai Gaurango Nitai Gaurango Nitai Gaurango Jaya Nitai Gaurango Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Pariparatacharya Ashtottar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Gaur Premanand Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text number 41. Tad idam grahayam asa. Tadidam grahayam asa. Tadidam grahayam asa. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sarva Veda Itihasanam. Sarva Veda Itihasanam. Sarva Vedeti Asanam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Tadidam grahayam asa. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sarva Vedeti Asanam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Tadidam grahayam asa. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sarva Vedeti Asanam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Tadidam grahayam asa. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sarva Vedeti Asanam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Tadidam grahayam asa. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sarva Vedeti Asanam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Tadidam grahayam asa. Sutam atmavatam varam. Sarva Vedeti Asanam. Saram Saram Samudritam. Synonyms: tat, that, idam, this, grahayam asa, made to accept, sutam, unto his son, atmavatam, of the self-realized, varam, most respectful, sarva, all, Veda, Vedic literatures, books of knowledge, Itihasanam, of all the histories, Saram, cream, Saram, cream, Samudritam, taken out. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Sri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the self-realized. After extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures, and histories of the universe. Translation with repetition. Sri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the self realized. After extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Men with a poor fund of knowledge only accept the history of the world from the time of Buddha, or since 600 BC. And prior to this period, all histories mentioned in the scriptures are calculated by them to be only imaginary stories. That is not a fact. All the stories mentioned in the Puranas and Mahabharata, etc., are actual histories, not only of this planet, but also of millions of other planets within the universe. Sometimes the history of planets beyond this world appears to such men to be unbelievable, but they do not know that different planets are not equal in all respects, and that therefore some of the historical facts derived from other planets do not correspond with the experience of this planet. Considering the different situation of different planets and also time and circumstances, there is nothing wonderful in the stories of the Puranas, nor are they imaginary. We should always remember the maxim that one man's food is another man's poison. We should not therefore reject the stories and histories of the Puranas as imaginary. The great rishis like Vyasa had no business putting some imaginary stories in their literatures. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, historical facts selected from the histories of different planets have been depicted. It is therefore accepted by all the spiritual authorities as the Mahapurana. The special significance of these histories is that they are all connected with the activities of the Lord in a different time and atmosphere. Srila Shukadev Goswami is the topmost personality of all the self-realized souls, and he accepted this as the subject of studies from his father Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva is the great authority, and the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam being so important, he delivered the message first to his great son, Srila Shukadeva Goswami. It is compared to the cream of the milk. Vedic literature is like the milk ocean of knowledge. Cream or butter is the most palatable essence of milk. And so also is Srimad Bhagavatam, for it contains all palatable, instructive, and authentic versions of different activities of the Lord and his devotees. There is no gain, however, in accepting the message of Bhagavatam from the unbelievers, atheists, and professional reciters who make a trade of Bhagavatam for the laymen. It is delivered to Srila Sukadev Goswami, and he had nothing to do with the Bhagavata business. He did not have to maintain family expenses by such trade. Srimad Bhagavatam should therefore be received from the representative of Shukadeva, who must be in the renounced order of life without family encumbrance. Milk is undoubtedly very good and nourishing, but when it is touched by the mouth of a snake, it is no longer nourishing. Rather, it becomes a source of death. Similarly, those who are not strictly in the Vaishnava discipline should not make a business of this Bhagavatam and become a cause of spiritual death for so many hearers. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that the purpose of all the Vedas is to know Him, Lord Krishna, And Srimad Bhagavatam is Lord Krishna himself in the form of recorded knowledge. Therefore, it is the cream of all the Vedas, and it contains all historical facts of all times in relation with Krishna. It is factually the essence of all history. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashadakaya Chakshurunmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Nitinamine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today's verse is spoken by Suta Goswami to the sages of Naimisharanya. The sages of Naimisharanya, in the previous chapters we saw, they had asked 6 questions to Suta Goswami. What are the 6 questions asked by the sages? What is the ultimate good for all the people of this world, especially for people in Kali Yuga? What is the ultimate good? What benefits them the most? And then he asks, explain the essence of all the scriptures. The scriptures are so vast. It is divided into Shruti and Smriti. And there are crores and crores of verses. But what is the essence of all the scriptures? What is the core idea or the message that the scripture is trying to convey? This was the second question asked by the sages of Naimisharanya to Suta Goswami. Then they asked him about why did Lord Krishna appear as a son of Vasudeva and Devaki? Why did Lord choose his parents as Vasudeva and Devaki? Why did he appear? And then that is the third question. Fourth, he asks about the various activities of the Lord in different incarnations. What are the activities of the Lord? So Jiva Goswami says that here it is specifically referring to the incarnations called Purushavataras. Purushavataras are avatars like Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashai Vishnu, Kshirodakashai Vishnu. And then he asks them to narrate the pastimes of the Lord in various incarnations, referring to Leela Avatar, Kurma Avatar, Matsya Avatar, Vamana Avatar, Leela Avatars of the Lord. And then fifth question is, whom did the religion take shelter of? Because Krishna incarnated in this world to establish dharma. Dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. He incarnates to establish dharma, but now that the Lord has left to his abode, whom did the religion take shelter of? So these are the 6 questions asked by the sages of Naimisharanya to whom? To Suta Goswami. In answer to the 4th question and the 5th question, Suta Goswami describes this chapter. Krishna and all the other incarnations are described in this particular chapter, where he begins with the descriptions of the Leelas of the Purushavataras, of Mahavishnu, of Garbhodakashai Vishnu, Kshirodakashai Vishnu, and then he goes on to describe the different Leela avatars of the Lord, like Rama, correct, Vamana, Vyasadeva, Shaktavesha avatar of the Lord. So there are different avatars of the Lord. Purushavataras, like I said, are the Vishnu expansions. Then there is Guna Avataras. Guna Avataras means according to the modes of material nature, there is Brahma, there is Vishnu, and there is Shiva. Guna Avataras. Then there are Leela Avataras, Matsya, Kurma, the famous 10 avatars. In fact, The number of avatars are not limited to 10. They're like bubbles in the ocean. There are innumerable incarnations of the Lord. So they're all Leela avatars of the Lord. And there is another category of avatara called Manvantara avatara. The entire day of Brahma, which is called one kalpa. A day of Brahma is called one kalpa. This kalpa has thousands of cycles of 4 yugas: Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. This forms one cycle. 1,000 such cycles of those yugas forms one day of Brahma. That one day of Brahma, 14 different Manus rule. So 1,000 yugas divided by 14 is about 28. Correct? So every 28 cycle, the Manu keeps changing. So they are called Manvantara. So every Manvantara, there is one avatar. They are called Manvantara avatars. And then finally, there is Manvantara avatar and there is Shaktavesha avatar, like Vyasadeva, the empowered incarnation of the Lord. Vyasadeva is empowered incarnation of the Lord. The spiritual master coming in the bona fide parampara, they are empowered. Some are empowered incarnations of the Lord. Some are directly incarnations of the Lord's internal potency, like gopis. Acharyas have appeared in the parampara. Great personalities have appeared in the parampara. So all of these things are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And therefore, these activities of the Lord are very sweet to hear. They can be appreciated by a pure devotee of the Lord. They relish the pastimes of the Lord. They relish it so much so that they forget the material pangs of hunger and thirst, just like Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit could not feel hunger and thirst for 7 continuous days. He was completely absorbed in relishing the Bhagavatam. Why is one able to relish the Bhagavatam? It is just appearing like normal story. But here Prabhupada writes in the purport that this Bhagavatam is the recorded incarnation. It's a recorded knowledge which is non-different from Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam is Lord Krishna himself in the form of recorded knowledge. And that Lord Krishna's pastime, when we discuss, we are actually directly in touch with Krishna. And with whom we can discuss this Bhagavatam, from whom we can hear this Bhagavatam. We cannot hear this Bhagavatam from a materialistic person, a person with materialistic propensities. Even a tinge of materialistic propensity contaminates the Bhagavatam. Even a tinge, just like when there is milk touched by the lips of a serpent, it's still white in color, but that milk is poisonous. It will appear like the Bhagavatam is beautifully narrated by a person who has a materialistic propensity. It will appear like milk, but it is poisonous. It can contaminate the consciousness. It can kill the spiritual growth of a person. That is what Prabhupada writes in the purport, that when that milk is touched by the mouth of a snake, it is no longer nourishing. You know, milk nourishes a person. It no longer nourishes a person. Rather, it becomes a source of death. And Prabhupada uses the word, it becomes a source of spiritual death. So this Bhagavatam is being glorified by Suta Goswami like this. It is described that the Bhagavatam is the cream of Vedic literatures. Saram, saram. Saram is what? Cream. Saram, saram, samudritam. Sarva Vede itihasanam. Of all the Vedas and Itihasas, it is the saram, it is the essence. And that is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that is what the Sutta Goswami is going to describe to all the sages of Naimisharanya. There is one personality who appeared in the Moon dynasty. This king, this person is basically called Vaivasvata Manu. Vaivasvata Manu basically was a king. He was ruling the Manvanta Avataras. One of the Manus is basically Vaivasvata Manu. This Vaivasvata Manu had a deep desire that in my parampara there must be a son. And he had performed this Putra Kameshti Yajna. You know, Putra Kameshti Yajna is basically to have a son that Yajna has performed. But during the performance of the Yajna, all the participants of the Yajna should have the right frame of mind. Even if they have a wrong frame of mind, the mantra can go wrong. So it is said the wife of Vaivasvata Manu desired to have a daughter. And because of her desire, it so happened by the will of Providence that the Brahmanas chanted the mantra slightly wrongly. And instead of having a son, as per Vaivasvata Manu's desire, they had a daughter. Vaivasvata Manu was devastated. Who's going to take forward my parampara, my family lineage? He was devastated. And he had decided everything, he had planned to keep a particular name for my son. But unfortunately, a daughter was born. And the daughter was named as Ila. The name of the daughter was Ila. And then this distressed Vaivasvata Manu approached the great sage Vasishtha. And he asks, my dear sage, I had a deep desire to have a son who can carry forward my lineage. But unfortunately, a daughter was born. Vasishtha was so powerful that he could change the gender of the child. And who was born as a daughter was changed to a son. And the son's name he kept as Sudyumna. Sudyumna was a great and a powerful and a virtuous king. He was ruling the entire world. And kings for the pleasure of adventure is there. So he goes to different forests, and one day he comes across a forest called in the forest where Lord Shiva and Parvati were performing their pastimes. And the intimate pastimes of Lord Shiva and Parvati is concealed. It is never revealed to anyone. But it so happened in that forest once, the sages who were passing by that forest suddenly saw Shiva and Parvati. Correct? They were very, very close. And Parvati became embarrassed. And Parvati said to Shiva, my dear Lord Shiva, if this forest, is open to all, then we will not have any kind of a privacy. What do we do? Then Shiva, he basically made a setup where anybody who enters the forest, their genders will change. So the Sudyumna entered such a forest. And the moment Sudyumna entered the forest, Sudyumna's gender changed. He became a female. And all the soldiers, everybody became female. Then again Vaivasvata Manu broke his head. No, I wanted to have a son. Again he's changed his this thing to female. So now he's called Ila. He was born as Ila, then he became Sudyumna, again he's become Ila now. And that too, not only that, on the way back from the forest, Ila met one of the demigods called Buddha, who's Mercury, who's in charge for Mercury planet. And she got married to Buddha and they had a son. Look at how complex the situation is. And then Sudyumna is now what to do? Sudyumna is no more. Sudyumna has become Ila. So then again they approach Vashishta, and Vashishta prayed to Lord Shiva. Vashishta knew that this is a problem. He prayed to Lord Shiva. My dear Lord Shiva, it is you who put this, made this setup. Ki anybody who enters the forest, they will become female. Now this is the problem. Please resolve. There's no next king after Vayavasvata Manu. There's no king. What do I do? So then Shiva said, see, I cannot take back whatever I have given, but let's make a compromise. What is that compromise? For 1 month he'll be male, for 1 month he'll be female. So this kind of a compromise was done. Correct? Imagine somebody is a male and then after 1 month, he behaves like a female. He's tying sari and coming. One day he's carrying the sword and this thing like a warrior. After 1 month, he is wearing a dress like a female. He's behaving like a female. So this kind of, why I'm bringing about the story is because although these stories may appear imaginary, it may not be within the ambit of our appreciation, but we should understand that these stories are not just stories. That is why Prabhupada writes in the purport. What does Prabhupada write in the purport? He says that these historical facts derived from other planets. These are all not earthly activities, otherworldly activities. They don't belong to this world. Derived from other planets do not correspond with the experience of this planet. It does not correspond with the experience of this planet. But we should understand that different situations of different planets, time and circumstances are existing. They are all there. These kind of situations are there. But just because it is not there within our experience, we tend to conclude that these are all imaginary stories. Prabhupada says that these are not imaginary stories. These are factual histories which are captured in the Puranas. So that is what Prabhupada is pointing out. So although the story may appear like some kind of a imaginary story, these are all not just stories. These are all histories of universes. In fact, the modern day history, if you try to understand, how do people form history? It is said the oldest known history to mankind, recorded history, when I say recorded, written down, or they have strong evidence of history, dates back to about 5,000 to 5,000 years back, and it is found in a place called, in a place around Iraq, the Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamia was a civilization that was existent around the region of Iraq, and they have found artifacts. So historians basically collect artifacts, some pots, some bones, and they try to understand evidence based upon these artifacts. When they find multiple evidences in a particular geography, they try to connect both and come up with stories. That is the way historians work. So Prabhupada says that beyond 600 BC, whatever history people have recorded, they are all imaginary stories. They are not real stories, they are imaginary. Why are they imaginary? Because all these artifacts that they collect, they connect. Okay, this artifact, is found here. Another few miles down the line, this particular artifact was found. Another few miles down the line, some bones were found, dating back to the same age. So therefore, the possible story is that people from here migrated to another place. then they had settlements there, and then from there they migrated to another place where their race got destroyed. So they make a story like that. So whatever is existent in history tends to become imaginary and speculative. And there are histories like this. It is said that David, mentioned in the Bible, was said to be an imaginary personality for many, many years. Until 1993, they found out the place where David lived. You see how they changed the history? Dwaraka was considered to be an imaginary place, but today Dwaraka is proved to be existent under the oceans, under the Arabian Ocean near Gujarat. And the professor has done a study, has published a paper on this. So history cannot be captured just by understanding the artifacts like the modern historians. On the other hand, the Puranas are authentic histories captured by great personalities. And Puranas talk about some things which is within our experience. It also talks about certain things which is much, much beyond our experience. That is what we can understand. So therefore, but sometimes, many times we hear this argument, ki all of you are reading the Bhagavata Purana, correct? This Bhagavata Purana is a part of the Smriti literatures. But actually, originally, Vedas are Shruti, not Smriti. Smriti literatures are just to capture the mind of less intelligent people. It is for the less intelligent people. But Shruti is much more advanced. It is the advanced knowledge of the absolute truth. So if people have to understand God, they have to go through Shruti and not through Smriti. You are referring to Bhagavad Gita, it is a part of Mahabharata, which is Smriti. You are referring to Bhagavata Purana, which is basically Smriti. But these are all just subject matters. That's why if you see Shruti is Smriti, especially the Puranas and the Itihasas comes under Smriti. Smriti means that which can be remembered. Shruti means that which is heard. So it is described that the four Vedas, we all know the four Vedas. What are the four Vedas? Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda and Sama Veda. These Vedas comes under what is called Shruti. So the traditional people who are practicing, who are Brahmanical in nature in India, they proclaim this of the Krishna consciousness movement. Your movement is simply based on Smriti, which is a lower form of Shastra. It is meant for some other people. It's meant for people who are not so intelligent. But the same Itihasas, Puranas, which are considered as Smriti, remembered, which is written down, Madhvacharya refutes this argument by quoting a verse. He quotes a verse from the Chandogya Upanishad. We should all know that the four Vedas are there. The Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda and Sama Veda. And these are further, the essence of all of these is captured in what is called Upanishads. And finally, after Upanishad, there is the Vedanta Sutras. So the Upanishads, the four Vedas, the Vedanta Sutra, they're considered as Shruti. Now, Madhvacharya is pulling out an evidence from Shruti itself to show how the Upanishads proclaim that the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, the Itihasas and Purana are called Panchama Veda. So he quotes a very, very interesting verse. I'll just read out that verse. Okay, I don't have that verse with me. So he quotes the Chandogya Upanishad verse to say how Itihasas and Puranas, Ramayana and Mahabharata is called Panchama Veda. It is called the fifth Veda apart from the four Vedas. So therefore, Bhagavad Gita, which is a part of the Mahabharata, is Shruti and Smriti simultaneously. Why is it Shruti? Because Bhagavan himself spoke. That which is heard is called Shruti. And Arjuna heard it from Lord Krishna. Therefore, it is Shruti. And why is it Smriti? Because it is a part of Mahabharata. Mahabharata and Ramayana, although part of Smriti, they are called Panchama Veda. And Srimad Bhagavatam is said to be the Saram Samudritam. The essence of all the Vedic literature is captured in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the most mature work of Vyasadeva. That is the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it is extremely important to understand these principles. Especially while talking to people, they will not have the right understanding of what the Shrutis are, what the Smritis are, how are they different. Are Smritis inferior? No, they are not inferior. So they are as important as the Shrutis. It helps us understand the Shrutis better. Correct? So therefore, Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, although they are Smritis, they are superior literatures and they are the essence of all the Vedic literatures. So that is what we can understand. We can understand from today's verse. Another important point that Prabhupada makes, when we talk about the essence, what is the meaning of the word essence? What is the meaning of the word essence? Yes, anybody? Essence means what? We have heard of vanilla essence, rose essence. Is that the same essence that we are talking about? What is the meaning of the word essence? Sar. Okay, sar is what? What is sar? Concentrated form of knowledge. Oh. Yeah. So almost all of you are correct. The best part, the concentrated form. Concentrated form is basically literal meaning of essence, like vanilla essence. The concentrated form of vanilla. Correct? But what is the essence here? Actually, essence is what makes an object or a person fundamentally itself, without which no longer, see, essence means you cannot separate. Let us take for example an object. The color of the object is red. You cannot separate redness from the object. So the essence of the object is red. You getting it? Like talcum powder, it's powdered form. The essence is that it is powdery. That's the meaning of essence. You cannot separate from that object. So the essence of Vedic literature, like for example the cream of the milk is what makes the milk creamy and like milk. If you separate fully the cream of the milk will lose its property. Correct? So essence is like that. So essence is very, very important. So the Bhagavatam is the essence of all scriptures. It's an integral part. It is the purpose of all Vedic literatures. Vedaisya sarvair ahameva vedyaha. The purpose of Vedas is to know me. And Bhagavatam is a literal incarnation of Krishna himself, where one can understand about Krishna. Therefore, it is the essence of all the Vedic scriptures. So it's extremely important to understand the position of the Bhagavatam, the position of the Bhagavad Gita, and how it conveys the essence of all the scriptures. It's extremely important. Another important point that Prabhupada shares in this particular verse is that of how one must hear the Bhagavatam from a pure devotee of the Lord. If one does not hear the Bhagavatam from the pure devotee of the Lord, then the consciousness becomes contaminated. So, how do we associate with the pure devotee of the Lord? What has Prabhupada established an institution where we can engage ourselves in associating with the pure devotee of the Lord. Prabhupada set up a system where, people with different propensities, people in the hippies in those days, if they were interested in music, they were encouraged to perform music for the Lord. If somebody was interested in painting, they were encouraged to paint for the pleasure of the Lord. In this way, Prabhupada engaged all of them in the service of the Lord. And this engagement of our propensity, whatever propensity, somebody may be a good artist, somebody may be a good singer, somebody may be a good writer, all of these mundane propensities can be engaged in the service of the Lord. But this engagement, Prabhupada gives another word for that engagement. He calls it dovetailing. But the concept of dovetailing is a very, very important concept that Prabhupada introduces, and we have to understand this deeply. In the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada talks about the idea of dovetailing. So I'll just read out this particular verse where Prabhupada talks about this concept of dovetailing or engaging all our propensities in the service of the Lord. This is very right in the introduction. Prabhupada describes in pure consciousness. What is pure consciousness? Consciousness that is not contaminated by material nature. Pure, unadulterated, completely spiritual, zero material inclination. Pure consciousness. In pure consciousness, our actions will be dovetailed to the will of Ishvara, and that will make us happy. And then Prabhupada says that it is not that we have to cease our activities, all our activities in life, whatever activities you may be doing. You may be working in some company, you may be, doing some teaching profession, somebody may be a doctor, you may be in any profession. Our activities can be purified. Whether you're a doctor or you're an engineer, whatever you are, it can be purified, and those purified activities are called bhakti. But how do we purify? How do we purify? Right now we are engaged in meeting so many people, we are engaged in so many different activities, but how do we dovetail all of this in the service of the Lord? It's a very important question to understand. And Prabhupada says, one can only dovetail in pure consciousness, but my consciousness is not pure. How do I engage in the Lord's service? I have the desire to engage in Lord's service, but with my contaminated consciousness, how will I engage? So Prabhupada writes in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, how is a devotee engaged in the service of the Lord, even though he is not pure? So the first class devotee of the Lord attains pure devotion service. But despite his loftiness means despite his greatness, for the Lord's satisfaction, he may play the volunteer part of a preacher of the Lord's glory. What does a pure devotee of the Lord do? The pure devotee of the Lord has attained pure devotion service. He thinks everybody in this world is a pure devotee. Even though he is engaged in serving Maya or is engaged in serving in the material nature, he still thinks that this is a pure devotee of the Lord. That's the way a pure devotee sees. But for the Lord's satisfaction, he plays a volunteer part. What volunteer part does he play? As a preacher of the Lord's glories. Like Srila Prabhupada. He is a preacher of the Lord's glories. And what does he do? He takes the charge. He is pure in consciousness. He is engaging all his propensities for the pleasure of the Lord. And what does he do? He dovetails all into devotion service. And Prabhupada says, even mundane interest of the neophyte is engaged in the Lord's service. So Prabhupada says here, just to give the neophyte means the one who is beginning to practice Krishna consciousness, just to give the neophytes a chance to transform mundane interest into transcendental bliss. So Prabhupada is playing the role of a preacher. He's a representative of the Lord, and he is playing the role of a preacher, and only he can dovetail our mundane interest. Mundane interest means our interest in writing, our interest in painting, our interest in engineering. Only he can dovetail all of this for the pleasure of the Lord. So therefore, mundane activities also can give you transcendental or a spiritual bliss only when it is done in connection with the spiritual master. Now, how do we do that? Prabhupada set up a wonderful organization where the Lord's glory is preached. Now, how do we connect ourselves with the organization? The first and the most fundamental principle for any practitioner of Krishna consciousness, what does Prabhupada say? Is the principle of obedience. By the principle of obedience, we can dovetail our mundane interest for the pleasure of the Lord. Therefore, in our Vaishnava community, the first thing that we train to devotees is to tell, be obedient. When you say obedience, the idea becomes like, I should be a slave. Slave is different. Slave is bonded labor. Prabhupada uses the word labor of love, that is called bhakti. Bhakti towards Guru, and your obedience and adherence to Guru's instruction is what pleases the Guru. And in that way, we can dovetail our mundane interest for the pleasure of Krishna. So therefore, without pure devotees' movement, without pure devotees' presence, we cannot use our material propensities for the pleasure of the Lord. Therefore, the Vedic literatures describe Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tata guru. As much as devotion you have for Lord Krishna, that much devotion you should have for Prabhupada. Without Guru's bhakti, Krishna bhakti cannot develop. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado, yasya aprasadan nagati kutopihi. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado means only by the mercy of Guru we can get Krishna's mercy. Yasya aprasadhan, if you don't please the spiritual master, the next line says, if you don't please, then there is no question of mercy of Krishna. Because you can touch Krishna only through pure consciousness. And we are not pure. But we are given the opportunity, although we are not pure, to offer this to Krishna through the transparent via medium of a spiritual master. If there is a transparent object, light passes through easily, isn't it? So the transparent medium transparently passes on the mercy of Krishna to the devotees or to the practitioner who is on the material consciousness through the spiritual master. So therefore, our love for Guru supersedes everything in life. Our love for Guru. But you cannot love a person until unless you know the person. Can you go and love some stranger? No. We all love our parents. Why? We know them in and out. Similarly, if you have to develop love towards Prabhupada, it is very, very important to understand the mind of Prabhupada, which are revealed in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, we have to associate with the pure devotee of the Lord by reading his books, understanding the mind of Prabhupada, developing a relationship with Prabhupada. Krishna consciousness, although it's a process, fundamentally Krishna consciousness has got to do with relationship dynamics. How deep is your relationship? Imagine there is a small child. The small child writes one letter to mother. Correct? The small child, just before the Mother's Day, it is written one letter. I love you, mummy. One letter is written and it's all crumpled and it is thrown somewhere. Okay. It is thrown near a dustbin. So the mother, while sweeping the floor, she finds out the small piece of paper which is all crumpled and all that. It is written, "I love you, mummy." How will the mother feel? She'll feel good, isn't it? All that was found near the dustbin, it is all useless. But that sentence makes her feel very good. Similarly, it is not the service per se, it is the bhavana with which you do service. Now, if you see the child, who understands better? A pediatrician. You know what is a pediatrician? A doctor who teaches children, they're called pediatrician. Now, just before the child goes to the doctor, they will collect all data of the child. Blood this much is there, sugar this much is there, so much data pediatrician has. All the data is there of the child. Do you think mother knows the child better or the pediatrician knows the child better? Who knows the child better? Yes? Pediatrician. Mother. Why does mother know the child better? Not because of the data, because of love. So love, if you love a person, you can know a person better than you know of a data of a person. Correct? So simply by understanding Vedas, God is like that, God is like this, you cannot understand Krishna. It is only by love of Krishna you can understand Krishna. You can develop a relationship. And love of Krishna, who can give us? Who can give us? Prabhupada can give us. Therefore, you have to love Prabhupada first before loving Krishna. But to love Prabhupada, you should have a relationship with Prabhupada. And relationship begins from what? Any relationship begins from gratitude. Prabhupada has done so much in my life. I'm grateful for Prabhupada. That gratefulness feeling transforms into respect for Prabhupada. And when you respect a person, you will follow his instructions. And that respect transforms into love. That relationship with Guru, alignment of all our desire for the pleasure of Guru, Arana Koryo Mane Asha, that is what gives us Krishna Bhakti. It helps us progress in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, our relationship with the spiritual master is of prime importance. Otherwise, Krishna is some personality that we think of as Krishna. What we think of as Krishna is not Krishna. What Prabhupada presents of Krishna is actually Krishna. Is that clear? So these are the understandings from that we can understand from today's verse. So these are a few points that Prabhupada covers in today's verse. Today's verse, especially about how history can be distorted, it need not be factual, especially referring to modern history. He also establishes about how Itihasas and Puranas are the authentic history of this universe, not of this world, of this universe. And he also brings about a point as to how important it is to learn and understand Srimad Bhagavatam from a pure devotee of the Lord. So these are the points that we can understand from today's verse. So before we stop, any questions anybody has? Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for the So, bro, as I said that to love someone, first we need to know about them.
Yes.
And we give example like for when Srila Prabhupada, knowing his mind, we should read his books.
Yes.
For knowing Krishna, we should read his books. So, bro, my question is based on reading books.
Yeah.
So, other senior Lakshminatha has given different opinion how to read. Some devotees have told that first reading is just completed and second, third reading you understand more.
Correct.
And other devotees say that no, like even if you read less, but you read it properly so that you understand. So how to read?
The best reader is the one who does submissive oral reception. But submissive oral reception, Prabhupada writes in the second canto, is an art. Art cannot be learned in one day. Have you seen this antibiotics? Antibiotics sometimes, no, if some lung infection is there, they'll prescribe for 30 days, not for one day. So on day one, when you take antibiotics, your cough is not reducing, still the lung infection is there. But that medicine is actually working, but it takes time to work. So therefore, devotees recommend that you may not be able to relish the Bhagavatam, but please take the dosage. Okay? When you do multiple dosages of that, eventually you will come to a point where you will relish the Bhagavatam. You getting the point? So, if reading and covering fast or reading slow, I would say that is a call that you should take. There is no one particular formula, ki read slow, read fast. But whatever you're reading, try your best at your stage to grasp, not just to gathering information. You are trying to relate with personalities in the Bhagavatam. King Kulashekara, when he was hearing the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada has written Mukundamala Stotra. That is actually told by King Kulashekara Alvar. Kulashekara Alvar, when he was hearing the Bhagavatam, he was seeing personalities. Rama is going to be attacked. So what he did, he called all his soldiers, gathered his soldiers, and went to Sri Lanka to try and support Lord Rama. Just by hearing. So that is the highest idealistic. But to start with, you must start with Prabhupada is sharing something. Let me hear. Great personalities. Shukdev Goswami is speaking. Vyasadeva is speaking. Parikshit Maharaj is hearing. All the sages are speaking. In that setup is happening. There are great personalities doing great talks. And when you hear that in the translation, and then you hear the purport, Prabhupada is talking on that level. So those personalities are talking. What does Prabhupada have to say about this particular conversation? Let me hear from the purport. Can you see how it changes your mood? And then you read. Oh, this is what Prabhupada is saying. Oh, this is the meaning of Shukdev Goswami's talk. Oh, this is the meaning of Parikshit Maharaj's question. Oh, I didn't know that. That is a kind of a mood in which you have to hear. You're not reading to gather information. Gathering information, ChatGPT will do. There's a difference. I'm giving this example to make us understand. ChatGPT can understand and organize information very, very nicely, more than our brains. But we are not here for that gathering information data. We are here for the love of Prabhupada. That relationship with Prabhupada is what reveals the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. Divya Gnan Hridaya Prakashita will happen. So reading fast or slow, not an issue. You can read either fast or slow, depending upon how much you can understand. But more importantly, fundamentally, is the relationship that you have with the spiritual master. That counts more. Okay, is that clear? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Prabhu, you spoke about the obedience.
Yes.
So, Prabhu, in the organization, in the vendor service, we under some authority and we are obedient to that authority. So sometimes being obedient feel like we are being limited, or
Yeah.
like our ideas in the service is not taken away.
Yes.
So we feel like when we serve independently, that will be much better. How do we overcome that, or how can we understand that?
So we should always understand the relationship dynamics between a master and a servant. A master and a servant is a loving relationship. Dasya rasa it is called, ideally. So it's not that the master is a person who's fanatic about his ideas. Master also loves the servant, and servant also loves the master. So the mood is that when a servant is serving the master, it's not that his ideas are not taken. No. You can always suggest, Prabhu, you're telling me to do this, no? But can this not be done in this way? Isn't that better? The servant can always speak. He can suggest, he can negotiate, he can talk. But still the master says, no, do like this. So then you can do it. But in this case, what happens is the challenge comes. You may have a propensity to think that the master is exploiting me. Because master is not a pure devotee, he's trying to be a pure devotee. And the servant is also an aspiring pure devotee. So when two people meet, then what is the relationship dynamics? Relationship dynamics, that's why I asked Madhu Pandit Prabhu, where whatever comes from an authority, is it absolute truth? So Madhu Pandit Prabhu says, whatever comes from the authority is not absolute truth, it's an opinion. If suppose I'm telling you that go and distribute books. Okay? It's an opinion. Yes, I agree to the principle and distribute books. I would suggest go and distribute books in the electronic city. But you feel that distributing books in electronic city is not very effective, but maybe near some other sector 45, if it distributed, it's better. So in this case, what specifically the authority tells is an opinion. You can contest, you can ask, Prabhu, sector electronic city we have gone, but it is not working out well. Sector 45 works out well for me, Prabhu. Can I go to sector 45? And you provide evidences in the past, this is the thing. And the authority is convinced, you can go. It doesn't mean that you are disobedient. So disobedience is not obedience is not like an absolute principle. We have to be obedient. Okay, yes, I'll do. Not like some slave. That's what I'm telling you. It's not a slave-master relationship. You understanding? And you must also know, this requires some fine intelligence to understand where to draw that line or the boundary. It requires a lot of many years in the ashram for us to understand, because there is always a gray area where you should draw a line. Because I'll tell you something. Authority tells, let us say, from today you chant only 8 rounds. That is not. So there are Krishna conscious core principles which cannot be touched. That is given by Prabhupada. Other principles with respect to service, vyavaharik principles, ideas, and all of that, that is opinion. It can be changed. It can be negotiated. So what you have to obediently follow is the principles set out by the spiritual master, which are like pan organization. Strategy for preaching, strategy for service, all of these can vary. But the underlying principle of obedience, you have to practice. It's an opportunity for you to practice obedience. It is not that you are getting exploited. No. The principle is very, very important. The principle is that although this Prabhu is telling my mind is rebelling, let me practice the principle of obedience. But in the course of that practice, it is not that I will do something which is bad for the organization. I will tell Prabhu, this is going to be bad for the organization, you're telling me to do. Are you sure? Prabhu, then the master says, okay, maybe we should reconsider and we should change. Master says, no, do like this only. And what you should do at that time, your consciousness is that, let me practice the principle of obedience. And when the result is bad, what will happen? His authority who is there will catch him and not you. You are spiritually successful. He is materially vyavaharically a failure. You are safe. So you should learn to play the spiritually safe game in the Krishna conscious community. You understanding? So these are all the fine nitty-gritties that when you stay in the ashram over a period of time, a devotee will get to know all these things. Is that clear?
Yes.
Any other questions before we stop? Okay, we'll stop. Yes, okay, one question we have. Hare Krishna.
So we have heard so many times about the absolute truth.
Yeah.
So why this thing is absolute truth, not only truth? Will please make my question advance. I'm very much confused with this.
Yeah. Absolute truth means the truth beyond which there is nothing else. It includes everything. The absolute value in mathematics should have got. What is the absolute value? One is a fractional value, one is the absolute value. Correct? Absolute means there is nothing beyond this particular truth. Everything within our experience and everything beyond experience is included in the truth. That is called absolute truth. Why is it called absolute truth? If you see, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate. Everything, both matter and spirit, comes from Krishna. Okay? So if it is coming from Krishna, the matter, this steel, this plastic, is within my experience. My clothes, my body is within my experience. My mind, my intelligence is within my experience. All of those things which is within my experience is actually coming from Krishna. There are so many things which are beyond my experience. Like for example, a parallel universe, some other completely unknown location. That is also coming from Krishna. So wherever you go, this truth is inescapable. You cannot escape that truth. You cannot do something outside the truth. That is called absolute truth. You understanding? If you take a mundane example, of course this cannot be stretched, but this analogy will help you. If you take mundane example, wood is made of atoms, books are also made of atoms. So what is the underlying truth of every material object? Atoms. So what is the truth? Atoms. Like that, there is a reality behind, fundamental reality behind everything in existence. Everything. My emotions is coming from that reality. My thinking power is coming from that reality. My ability to speak is coming from the reality. Somebody's ability to paint is coming from that reality. Somebody's ability to do wonderful technology is coming from that reality. In other words, the reality behind all experiences and the cause of the experiences, all of these things is there within the absolute, within the truth. And that truth is called as absolute truth. And that absolute truth is described as Krishna. So Krishna, we tend to think is a normal person. No, he is the absolute truth. When you say absolute truth, although Krishna's energy is everywhere, yet he is a person. Very complex topic to understand. Very, very difficult. Avajananti mamuda manushim tanamashritam. So when you say absolute truth, it is the truth beyond which there is no other truth. Because every truth comes from that absolute truth. You understanding the point? So that is what is being described as Param Satyam. In the first canto of the Bhagavatam, if you see, so Prabhupada writes, the concept of God is actually lower when compared to the concept of the absolute truth. Absolute truth is a fundamental thing which is there because of which everything is existing. Both matter, spirit, all of those things. There's no truth beyond that truth.
So in contrast to that, what is relative truth?
Relative is basically related to me. For example, if I'm to measure the tallest person in this room, I will take a relative measure. If you see in dimensional analysis, your first PUC subject, physics, if you remember, there is a particular standard of measurement from which all length, dimensions, everything is measured. Correct? So, therefore, the whole of physics is actually relative measurement of something. You understanding? So that's called relative truth. It's related to something. Another understanding of relative truth is that whatever truth I'm experiencing in this world is originating from another truth. The love, care, compassion, the feelings I have is a reflection of some other truth. It is related to that. If that truth didn't have, this truth will not exist. It's relative to that. Therefore, everything that we experience in the world is called relative truth. It's related to something which is beyond our experience here. So that's called relative truth. Is that clear? Yeah.
So there's another word from Karmamuni, that Prabhu, as you also know from the Bhagavatam, that 4 commas also they are totally brahmachari, they don't even want something, and not even Sukadeva also.
Yes.
They practice spiritual devotion.
Yes.
So Karmamuni was also mentioned as a very spiritual advanced person in Bhagavatam. So Prabhu, why Karmamuni actually desired to have a wife of like disposition?
Of?
Like disposition.
Like disposition. It means a wife of, he wanted to, he had a desire to have a wife. No, actually, Manu came and requested him, Madhu, the father of Devahuti, came and requested Kardamuni to get married to his daughter. It is not that he was constantly hankering for somebody to have as a partner. That was not the state of consciousness of Kardamuni. It so happened that Manu came and proposed and he agreed to marry. out of Manu's request. Okay, so that is the first point. And second one is, we have to know from the Shastras what is going on in Kardama Muni's mind. So this bit I know because I have heard from Prabhupada's books. But next bit, what is the dynamic of Kardama Muni's mind? To be frank, I do not know. Now that is something which I have to go through from Prabhupada and hear from Prabhupada. What is Prabhupada's opinion on this? Actually, when you go and approach that particular pastime, in whichever canto it is, in that same spirit, you will find answers for this. And it's perfect answer. So I would suggest you to go back to Prabhupada's books and read the purports carefully. And Prabhupada would have answered that question in one of the purports. What is happening in Kardama Muni's mind? Why Kardama Muni is not considered a pure devotee? Why? Correct, na? Why he is not? 4 Kumaras are pure devotees. Kardama Muni, why is not pure devotee? So we'll have to find out. It will be there in Prabhupada's purport. Is that clear? Okay, so we'll stop here. Granthar Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Vishnu Guru Srila Prabhupada ki.